Chapter 33. Run, Red, run. It was evening when she saw them. The howl of the wind across the endless desert had almost lulled Red back on watch after taking turns with Chester and Ace into a stupor as she leaned against the rock face. The sand was swimming in her field of vision, but there was a movement in the stubby trees from which they'd come, some disturbance coming down the sandy path and kicking up clouds of dust that made Red sit up straight. "Chester," she hissed. "Ace!" She heard them stir behind her, but didn't take her eyes off the far end of the sand. Soon enough, the first troop lurched into view. Hardened, brutal, and cold in their spiked red uniforms, they marched across the sand at a quick and measured pace. They were all enormous and carried heavy maces shaped like a suit of clubs. It was the armored guard, her mother's most elite legion of soldiers. "Oh, hearts," Ace breathed next to her. "We should have left already." Red shook her head. "My mother must have guessed we'd try to go through the pool of tears." "I should have woken you. It doesn't matter now," said Chester. "They'll search these cliffs for sure. Do we think there's any chance of running for it?" "We'll be seen, but I don't know how fast they can climb in all that metal." Ace set his jaw. "We should split up." He and Chester shared a look. "That'll be risky," Red said uncertainly. Ace nodded. "But it's the only way. They'll have to chase us separately, and if anyone gets caught, then the others have that better chance of getting away and going for help." Red stared at them both. There was some communication that had passed between them, something she didn't know, but there was no time for questions. Already the soldier cart's heavy footfalls could be heard from the cave. "Okay," said Red. Chester met her eyes, and though things had been difficult the last couple days, they had changed so much. He suddenly looked just like the floppy-haired boy she'd met in Max's class 2 weeks ago. She felt like she'd known him a lifetime. "Okay, Princess," Chester gave her that toothy, familiar smile that made Red's chest ache. "Let's go." They slipped out of the cave, Red on one side and Chester and Ace on the other. She would climb around the north face of the cliff, with Chester to the south and Ace going straight over the top. If they could move fast enough over the top of the cliffs, they might make it to the Vorpal Mountain before the carts could catch up. But scaling this cliff would not be easy. Red and the boys nodded at one another, and then Red began climbing as quickly as she could, a hand-over-hand sort of crab walk, clinging to the rock and making her way out to where it jutted over the desert. Shouts from the guards came almost immediately. Red felt sick and chanced a look back at the path. The guards, still maybe a half-mile off, had broken into a mechanical, athletic run and were drawing bows. "Clubs!" Red cursed, scrambling for another foothold. She wished she could yell to warn Chester and Ace. The regular soldier cards rarely used the heart-tipped arrows. They never really needed to, but this was the armored guard. A few arrows clattered near the mouth of the cave, ricocheting off the cliff face. Red's breaths became shallow and fast. The Queen of Hearts must want Ace and Chester dead or alive. Red closed her eyes for a moment, fighting overwhelming dizziness. She couldn't let the thought get to her. She kept going. Once a few yards away from the cave, Red could no longer see any part of the path or hear a noise other than the wind whistling over the cliff. It gave her anything but relief. She knew the armored guard could start climbing at any moment, and she wouldn't be able to see them coming. Her arms shook and her fingers ached as she reached for tiny ledge after tiny ledge. Her progress feeling unbearably slow. Red didn't dare look down. She thought of the first time she'd climbed the ivy of the tower, how brave she had felt. She tried to put herself back in that headspace and found it impossible. Red did not feel brave. She felt scared, and she knew they had never been in as much danger as they were now. "I am Red of Hearts," she said through gritted teeth. "I don't care. I don't care." Slowly, Red came around the other side of the cliff and, chancing a look over her shoulder, saw that the Vorpal Mountain was even nearer than before. But now came shouts and the ear-splitting noise of metal on rock above her. Red's heart sank. Had the guards already beaten them to the top? She hesitated, staring upward. The plateau was only a few yards away. She had to see what was happening. She had to know. Red scrambled and found a spot that allowed her to crouch behind a jagged outcrop of rock and peek over the top. She clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a cry. They had Ace. He was flanked by 2 guards, their hands in vice-like grips around his arms. He was far away from Red, but not so far that she couldn't see the dark gash in his cheek where an arrow must have grazed him. Another guard stood before him, mace glinting menacingly in the setting sun. The guard was saying something to Ace, who shook his head. Then Ace took a deep breath and bellowed, "Run!" Red nearly lost her balance as she gasped, but he wasn't shouting to her. As the guard with the mace turned, she saw Chester farther down the cliff, making a break for it as 3 guards tackled him from behind, nearly plummeting off the edge. "No," Red whispered. "No, no, 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 no. She's long gone," Ace was shouting and pointing in Chester's direction. "She went south, and she's got such a head start that you stupid cards will never catch up." The guard questioning him slammed the end of his mace into the rock face. "Oh, you think that scares me?" Ace screamed, but he seemed close to tears. "You think you're so tough? You're just a bunch of cards. You're just a bunch..." The guard pointed over Ace's head, and the others hauled him back toward the edge of the cliff, back toward the foot of the bluffs and the path.